It was 1957. The Cold War was heating up. Looking for an edge, the Soviets secretly launched a mission to hunt down supernatural power. Led by the ruthless Agent Spalko, a team infiltrated the massive Hangar 51. They were after a legendary prize, the remains of an alien. To find the needle in this haystack, they kidnapped the famous archaeologist Indiana Jones and his partner Mac. Forced to help them, Indy did something that baffled everyone at first. He had a soldier dump gunpowder into his hand, then he climbed up the tallest crate in the stack. He tossed the gunpowder into the air. Strangely, the dust didn't settle. Instead, it floated in a straight line, magnetized toward a specific crate. Indy hopped over to that spot and dropped a handful of buckshot. Sure enough, the pellets were sucked right into the crate's crack. Spalko was thrilled. She immediately ordered her men to pull out the magnetized crate and pry it open. A heavy iron coffin was revealed. The magnetic field went wild. Even the overhead lights started bending toward the box. Spalko was buzzing with excitement. She believed the artifact inside would tip the scales of the Cold War, giving the Soviets total dominance. As the coffin was opened, a fully wrapped figure lay inside. They sliced through the wrapping, revealing a gray, frozen alien hand. This was exactly what they were hunting for, though they didn't realize a crucial piece was missing. While everyone was distracted, Indy cracked his whip and snatched a gun from a soldier. But that's when Indy got double-crossed by his old friend Mac. It turned out Mac had been working with Spalko all along. Chaos erupted. Indy fought back and made a daring escape, jumping onto a rocket sled that blasted out of the warehouse, leaving the Soviets in the dust. Indy stumbled into a bizarre town where the streets were lined with nothing but mannequins. Before he could figure out what was going on, a piercing air raid siren began to wail. It turned out to be a doom town, a fake testing site built to see how much damage a nuke would do to a city. The chasing Soviets realized what was happening and peeled away in their car. Indy tried to hitch a ride, but they completely ignored him. With the nuke about to blow, Indy scrambled back into a house and spotted a heavy-duty refrigerator in the corner. He dumped the contents and didn't hesitate to lock himself inside. At that exact moment, a massive nuclear blast swept across the entire town. The devastating shockwave flattened everything in its path instantly. Even the fleeing Soviets couldn't outrun it. But amidst the destruction, that fridge was sent flying through the air by the blast, and miraculously, Indy survived the whole thing. Barely recovering from the shock, Jones returned home, where he was tracked down by a young guy named Mutt. It turned out that Mutt's legal guardian, the archaeologist Professor Oxley, an old friend of Indy's, had been kidnapped. Even Mutt's mother hadn't been spared. It all started 6 months earlier, when Oxley discovered a mysterious crystal skull in Peru. Legend said that whoever possessed it could not only find the fabled city of gold, but also gain enough power to change the world order. Indy began deciphering a letter Oxley had left behind. It mentioned a Spanish explorer named Orellana, who supposedly found the real crystal skull before mysteriously vanishing. Oxley wrote that only by following the lines that only God can see could one find Orellana's cradle, guarded by the living dead. In the Mayan language, cradle meant a final resting place. The lines only God can see referred to the ancient geoglyphs in the Nazca Desert of Peru, which were only fully visible from the sky. Clearly, Oxley was trying to tell them that the crystal skull was hidden somewhere in Nazca. Following the clues, the two arrived that night to dig at an old cemetery, but they overlooked the indigenous grave guardians. Just after they stepped into the tomb, a bone-chilling scream exploded from above. The guardians clearly didn't welcome visitors. Within seconds, Indy and Mutt were getting thrashed. Luckily, Indy reacted fast. He grabbed a shovel and smacked one of them. Realizing they couldn't win up close, another guardian started blowing poison darts. In a critical moment, Indy cleverly blew a poison dart right back at him. They pushed deeper into the tomb, finding the place lined with skeletons. Strangely, the skulls were all elongated. It was a deformity caused by binding them with cloth from childhood. They apparently did this to show reverence to their gods. Indy started examining one of the mummies. The moment he sliced open the wrappings, the body inside looked perfectly preserved, as if it had just died. But upon contact with the air, the corpse turned to dust in seconds. Then they spotted another mummy, whose wrappings had already been cut. Judging by the gold armor, this was likely the 16th century explorer, Orellana. But what surprised them even more was that, hidden behind Orellana's body, was an object glowing with a crystal sheen. It was the very crystal skull that countless people had died trying to find. But this wasn't just a carving, it was an actual bone structure with powerful magnetic properties. It seemed this was the god the natives worshipped. Just as they were getting ready to leave, Soviet agents arrived and surrounded them. It turned out that after kidnapping Oxley, the Soviets realized he had lost his mind. So, to find the crystal skull, They forged a letter in Oxley's name to lure Indy into the trap. But finding the skull wasn't enough. They also needed to find the City of Gold. Rumor had it that it was an alien city. If they returned the crystal skull, they would be granted a blessing. Only Oxley knew the exact coordinates. But because he had stared into the skull's eyes for too long, he had fallen into a trance-like state, so they had to pin their hopes on Indy. When Indy refused to cooperate, the agents dragged out Mutt's mother, Marion. Indy was stunned. She was his old flame, and it turned out Mutt was the son he had never met. Under duress, Indy had no choice but to try and communicate with Oxley. Watching Oxley wave his hand repeatedly, Indy immediately asked for a pen and paper. Once he held the pen, Oxley suddenly calmed down and quickly sketched a few hieroglyphs on the paper. Although Indy couldn't fully decode them yet, he figured out that the City of Gold was located near the confluence of tributaries in the Amazon. This triggered a massive chase sequence through the jungle. They stumbled right into a nest of giant killer ants. One Soviet soldier was just a split second too slow, and in an instant, he was stripped down to a bare skeleton. Desperate, Spalko grabbed a vine and hoisted herself into the air. But the ants were terrifyingly smart. They actually formed a living tower to reach her. One managed to crawl up Spalko's leg. She crushed it with a move that screamed, "Do not mess with me!" Meanwhile, a swarm was closing in on Oxley. Oxley held up the crystal skull, and an eerie, high-pitched frequency rang out. Terrified, the ants parted ways to avoid him. It hinted that these aliens had long ago mastered the tech to control Earth's creatures, and the skull was the key to that power. Taking advantage of the chaos, the group hijacked an amphibious vehicle and sped off. But a cliff was coming up fast. Indy yelled at Marion to slam on the brakes, but she hit the gas instead. Luckily, they bounced off a massive tree branch, which cushioned their fall before they hit the river below. Their pursuers weren't so lucky. But the danger wasn't over yet. A massive waterfall appeared ahead. The current was too strong, and it was too late to turn back. After surviving a brutal drop, they barely managed to make it to shore. To their surprise, they noticed the waterfall masked a cave entrance shaped exactly like the skull. The cave opening was right where the eye would be. Stepping inside, they were mesmerized by the ancient murals on the walls. It revealed that the Mayan civilization had been here 5,000 years ago. But they didn't worship the sun god. They worshipped beings that looked just like the crystal skull. Oxley had a hunch. He held up the crystal skull, and its shadow aligned perfectly with a carving on the wall. They were getting close. They pushed deeper into the temple, but they were being watched. Suddenly, the walls themselves seemed to peel away. It was a tribe of camouflaged warriors jumping out to attack. The group bolted, but the warriors were too fast and agile, and soon they were cornered. In the nick of time, Oxley held up the skull again. Seeing their god, the warriors bowed in reverence and backed off. It turned out Oxley had been here before, but unable to enter the inner temple, he had returned the skull to where he found it. Now, he finally realized how to open the temple gates. He explained it to Indy. The golden key wasn't a key at all. It was the flow of sand blocked by stones. Indy grabbed a rock and smashed the mechanism blocking the sand, and the others quickly joined in. As they cleared the blockage, tons of sand poured out. The ancient mechanism, asleep for 1,000 years, began to move. It was hard to imagine how ancient humans could have built this without help from an alien civilization. As 4 massive stone pillars shifted, the floor beneath them suddenly vanished. They plunged straight down into the abyss below. When the dust finally settled, the view dropped their jaws. The cave was packed with treasures spanning ancient history, far surpassing any museum collection on Earth. But Oxley couldn't care less about the gold. Holding the crystal skull, he walked straight toward a massive door. Something inside was calling to him. Indy took the skull and placed it into the wall recess, kind of like an ancient Face ID. Instantly, the heavy door reacted. Indy didn't wait. He stepped right inside. It was a throne room made of pure gold. 13 crystal skeletons sat in a circle, but the central one was missing its head. The legend of the City of Gold was real. If they returned the skull, they would be granted a gift. But before they could act, suddenly, Spalko and her remaining troops arrived. Spalko snatched the skull and marched greedily toward the throne. As she got close, the skull flew right out of her hands and onto the skeleton's neck. The group watched in shock as the complete crystal skeleton awakened. The aliens, acting as a hive mind, used Oxley to speak telepathically. Expressing gratitude and offering a gift, Spalko greedily demanded to know everything. So, the alien began beaming infinite knowledge directly into her brain. The temple started to crumble as a massive saucer spun up beneath the floor. Indy, Marion, Mutt, and Oxley ran for the exit. Mac, trying to stuff his pockets with gold, refused to leave and was sucked into the vortex. Spalko couldn't handle the information overload. Her eyes ignited, and she disintegrated into dust. the massive flying saucer rose from the debris and vanished into another dimension. The Amazon River rushed in to fill the crater, burying the city of gold forever. The scene cut back to the United States. Indy and Marion were finally married in a church ceremony. As they left, a breeze blew the church doors open. Indy's iconic fedora rolled across the floor to Mutt's feet. Mutt picked it up and prepared to put it on, suggesting he was ready to take up the mantle. But Indy swiped the hat from his hand just in time. He put it on his own head and smiled. The message was clear. Indiana Jones wasn't ready to retire just yet.